all I can say is, wow. I love it, baby. Woo.
It's a covenant cleanup.
Let's go, everybody. Let's go. Good morning.
Wow, wasn't that fun?
Amen, brother. Bullseye.
And that's a fact.
Shall we begin?
With the musical selection, it is soft and warm. It is the quiet storm. It is KFAN and the Love Covenant. 9 to noon radio from Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, home to your Minnesota Vikings, who had a fair amount of their players assemble yesterday for off-season workouts. In fact, right now, members of the Minnesota Vikings defense are in the field house going through some preparatory drills for conditioning and stuff like that. So you got Shaq Griffin over there, and you got Blake Cashman over there, and you got a bunch of new members of the Purple and Gold Covenant here for the off-season workout plan. And that, of course, would include Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, who will join 9 to noon today at 11 a.m. We have a coach's covenant today. Chris FInch, coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, should be joining us very, very soon to put a preview on his battle and the contest and contests in the playoff series coming up against the Phoenix Suns. So the coach's covenant begins at 9 with Chris FInch and continues at 11 o'clock with Kevin O'Connell. Brett Blakemore is guiding the Great Chip Love Covenant. Nordo produces with yours truly, Paul Allen, here from Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. And now we are very happy to be joined by Minnesota Timberwolves head coach Chris FInch, courtesy of Prize Picks, Daily Fantasy Made Easy, and Second Harvest Heartland and twoharvest.org. Chris, Paul Allen, good morning.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
Pretty well, thank you. For those who may have missed it, Chris is on the board at Second Harvest Heartland, and it's quite important to him. Professionally, he's looking for ways to harvest some victories against the Phoenix Suns. And before we talk about some matchups and stuff like that, Coach, truly, man, great job by you guys this year. You know, I know the last one Sunday is the one some will latch on to, but over the totality of the season, and I know you have more work to do, terrific work by you and your staff.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Paul. It's been a great year. Certainly has. Taken another big step forward, in terms of forming an identity, consistently performing at a high level every night. Young players getting better and better. So we got a great foundation to keep building, and we're excited about this playoff opportunity, and and a chance to kind of push forward, even in a landscape that's not been as kind to the Minnesota basketball scene as we would like in the last few years. But 3 years in a row in the playoffs, it's nothing that we should take for granted.
Yes, sir. Very well explained. And speaking of the Suns, I have some Phoenix Suns steam that I know you're just dying to hear, right? My intel and steam into a playoff series. Are you ready?
Sure.
In Phoenix's last 4 losses, Grayson Allen is shooting 32% and a robust 4 of 29 from 3. I present that asking, how key is it to put Allen on bad shooting games, given the others on whom they rely?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, with Booker and Durant in particular, now Beal seemingly finding his groove, they got a lot of guys who can create and make their own shot. So anytime they're going to be a handful. Anytime you can get a chance to affect the guys that are in the supporting cast, you got to do it. We got to do a better job of that. He's done a good job of hurting us in our matchups with him. And we just got to be more mindful. But we paid a lot of attention to the others, and sometimes these are the decisions that you make, and we've gotten burned, no doubt.
Secondly, is it fair to say with the three high, at times super high-enders they start, is it an absolute that, like with Booker, Durant, and Beal, that they all can't flourish? Like at least one has to be defended, say, into a bad game?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. And we've been able to kind of impact one of them, one way or another for most of the games we've played. It's just been the overall group. Where we've really gotten hurt, Paul, is starts. The starts of the game against Phoenix, all three times for us have been a disaster for one reason or another. And we had 11 turnovers in that first quarter on Sunday. In Phoenix 2 weeks ago, we started down 15-0. So we just, with a team with that much firepower, it is really hard to play from behind because their shot making is so elite that even when you close the gap to 8 or 7 or something like this and you feel like you're in striking distance, they can hit 2 or 3 tough shots in a row. Even if you play great defense on them, to push that lead back out to 12, 15 and give themselves enough breathing room. So we got to tighten the game up from the beginning. And to me, we've not been able to do that.
And it's excellent you said that. I mean, the last time you guys beat Phoenix, you outscored them 35-25 in the first quarter. So, I mean, this season they're a plus 40 in first quarters of games against you guys. So the fast start, it may be cliche, but like Saturday, I mean, with that crowd and everything, it's a must starting Saturday, right?
No doubt about it. It's playoffs, of course. Physicality's got to go up. The desperation's got to go up. We got to get that building and that crowd into it right away with our intent and the way that we're going to play from the jump. And that's what we've played and worked all season for, is to have this game, to open the playoffs at home, to maintain. Or give yourselves an opportunity to create an advantage with home court advantage and maintain that through a series and through a run. So this is what it's come down to.
Do you mind sharing the pros and cons of like your big lineups against Phoenix? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think we got to do a better job, and I got to do a better job of taking advantage of the big lineup on the offensive end of the floor, and there's different ways we can do that. Obviously, we can try to get the ball down inside a little bit more. We certainly got to be bigger and better on the offensive glass, kind of punish some of those lineups. Matchup-wise, on the defensive end of the floor, we got to be creative. We've done a good job of kind of figuring out schemes throughout the season, executing them from game to game, and we got a little bit of a library of things we feel like we could do with our big lineup against their lineup. They like to play, small or more spread lineups with all the shooting that they have. So we've got a week to kind of brush off those things, get good at them, and put them into play.
How generally speaking, Chris, is playoff officiating compared to, say, the regular season?
It's quite different, I would say. They hold their whistle for sure, a lot more. But, to be fair, since the All-Star break, they've been kind of refereeing that way anyway. They've kind of, I think, held their whistle down the stretch here over the last 25 games of the season. You're not going to play for fouls in the playoffs, and nor should you expect to play for fouls. And if you're playing for fouls, you're you're probably playing in the wrong mindset. So, we gotta be a little bit tougher and a little better in our finishing. But playing through contact, initiating smart contact at the defensive end of the floor, and being able to utilize more physicality there, for sure.
And off that, Chris FInch, coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, 9 to noon. Wolves and Suns Saturday at Target Center to begin the postseason. That's super cool. When you watch back stuff or watch games and off the foul calls or lack thereof, like when you're watching games or you watch them back and you see all types of players all over the league complaining about fouls. How often are the players telling the truth? How often are the players right?
I mean, it's like most things. I would say it's probably 50-50, you know.
Right.
Referees have an incredibly tough job, particularly in the game these days with how fast it has become. How fluid it is now. It's not as predictable. These plays that happen are, kind of oftentimes come out of nowhere. But we can't be relying on that.
From time for two more, from some Booker in-game comments last season to Beal the other day, plus more. I mean, we have a really physical series coming here, don't we?
I would hope so. That's what we need to make it. We need to make it a real physical series. And we need to set the tone early and often.
And did you feel Sunday, like I'm watching the game Sunday, and granted they jumped you, and then we had some other things take place, but like that they came out just incredibly physical. Is that something like you'll show your guys and they'll be like, "Yep, got it. Yep, got it."
Yeah, we have a lot of different video sessions during this week, which is the benefit of having clinched the playoffs, being in the top six, is you get a week to prepare. The benefit of being in the threes position is who you're preparing for, even before the week starts. So these guys will be given a lot of different highly digestible messages and video sessions, that we feel will point to some things that we need to do to be successful in this series.
That's terrific. Last one. And Nurkic for the Suns. I mean, I guess I'd forgotten this. You guys had Nurkic and Jokic in Denver like 7 years ago. Why didn't that stick? I mean, that's a pretty good one too.
Well, we played it together. Actually, we started the season. I think we played the first 15, 20 games. One at the 4, one at the 5. We played two bigs. And as the season then progressed, it was kind of about the time when everybody started playing more small lineups. Jokic's emergence was clear. Nurkic was too good of a player to be a backup, and Tim Conley at the time, I know it was a very, very difficult decision for him because I was there and we had a lot of discussions about it as a staff, to move on and trade him to Portland for some picks and pieces. And he flourished up there. He got to the role where he could actually start to become who he was always going to be. And then, obviously with Jokic, the rest is history. But we were spoiled to have two really skilled, talented young bigs at the same time, and you had to make a choice.
And off that, I mean, you spent a fair amount of time in Europe playing and/or coaching, but like European bigs. I mean, back to DeMontis' dad, Arvydas. DeMontis is an elite passer, Vlade Divac, and now we're talking about Nurkic and Jokic. I mean, like how do they raise their bigs to be such good passers? Well,
a lot of their development structures when they're young kids, it's all positionless. So if a kid is big, they don't just do big guy things with them. They teach. Everybody does the same drills over and over, all the way through, really, up until they're about 18. Everyone does the same post footwork. Everyone does the same perimeter handling. Everybody does the same, short-sided playmaking things. So everybody's skill level is being brought along, at the same time, and obviously people can have a well-rounded game regardless of whatever. I think sometimes in at least when I was growing up, I can't speak to how it is now so much, but when I was growing up, if someone was big, you planted them near the basket, you tried to throw them the ball, and you teach them a jump hook.
Right.
And the rest of the skill lagged behind, until they were able to either have it innately and get a chance to show it or move to another environment where somebody recognized it and was able to bring it out of them. But, what I experienced when I was in Europe was looking at a lot of the development structures is that it's kind of like everybody was treated like you are treated when you first learn to play basketball. All the kids are doing all the same thing, but they just kept doing that all the way through to their, professional club structures.
And then you get a German big named Dirk Nowitzki who's going to shoot 1,000 3-pointers a day and be like, I'm never passing. I'm just going to get to the basket, then get to the line and shoot 3-pointers. And it worked beautifully for that HOF. Hey, man, you're terrific. Best of luck this weekend. We'll talk next week.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep. See you later. Bye-bye. Chris FInch, coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's fantastic. And the Wolves and the Suns this weekend on KFAN. Alan Horton on lead vocals. He'll be in studio 9 to noon a couple of days from now. But when we return, being at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center with a bunch of the new players here and stuff, we have a football focus today. Just a week and small change in front of the NFL draft. And we begin it with one of our very favorites. YA, young Alec Lewis from The Athletic and theathletic.com. He joins us from the TCO radio studios when the radio show continues on FM 100.3 KFAN.
The fan at BigDeck.com want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com. Enter the keyword fun for this hour. The keyword is fun. KFAN.com, keyword fun. Miller Lite Vikings Draft Party is back at U.S. Bank Stadium April 25th, and you can get your tickets now to party on the field while taking in the first round of the NFL Draft. Get your tickets today, Vikings.com/draft party, and you can tune in for your home for the draft. KFAN each day leading up to the draft for your chances to win your way in. Draft coverage on the Fan, always presented locally by Pep's Draft House Pizza.
For helping. Did you ask KOC any questions yesterday at the presser? And good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, great to see you, by the way.
You too.
I ask KOC any questions? Mm-hmm. I don't remember asking him a question.
Which is a no.
No, I definitely think I did. I don't think I would show up and not ask a question. I mean, by law, by the law of the journalism ethics code, if you show up, you better ask a question. So,
or at least try. You have to have your hand up.
Excuse me. Kevin.
Right.
That's how it goes. And I whiffed in the TJ Hawkinson press conference. I went, I think 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts, trying to get the question in. But ultimately,
what was the question?
It wasn't great. I don't think it was anything great. So I don't know. But look, it's the spring. Yeah. What's the question? It's the spring. And you're not in full form.
I understand.
So I don't beat myself up too much about it.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
You go through your own off-season worarkouts?
If you'd have seen what I just saw in that facility, you would think I could do it. I mean, you would.
Well, this is Alec Lewis. And,
thank you.
He's a card-carrying member of the Love Covenant and has been since pretty much since he arrived from Anniston, Alabama. He previously worked for the RedZone.org, attempted to join Miles Simmons with ProFootballTalk.com, but Florio wouldn't hire him.
An NFL nonprofit, you say?
So he is with The Athletic, and you can follow him as 9 to noon does at Alec_Lewis via the tweet machine. And we indeed do thank him for helping and amplifying the presentation. Now, Adam Schefter, quite well respected, right?
I've heard of him, yeah.
He tweeted this morning or yesterday, I saw it this morning, that he believes Drake May is the preference of the Minnesota Vikings. Do you care to comment on that?
Do I care to comment? Mm-hmm. Even if I don't care, I should probably comment because I'm on the radio.
I know is an option.
No, I mean, look, going back to the combine, Drake May's a name that came up a lot, and you could talk about the Josh McCown connection and all of that, but I don't think I would go so far as to say, oh, them hiring Josh McCown to be their quarterback coach is an indication that they like Drake May. I think the indications that they like Drake May are people inside the building going back to last year when his tape was honestly better than this year, saw him as a guy with prototypical size and the type of attributes that could benefit you in the arms race that is quarterbacking in the NFL. And so if they were to like Drake May, it wouldn't surprise me at all. The other thing, and this stuff is always hard to get into externally, but talk to a lot of people within the industry who rave about his leadership ability, just his makeup, and that's the type of stuff that, I mean, I don't know if you can really assess it until they get in the building, but there would be a lot of reasons why I think Drake May would make sense, but I mean, they would probably reasons they make sense for the Patriots or for the Commanders or what have you up top. So Adam Schefter is as credible as they come. What he says, I would listen to, and so that's what I would say.
So with the way you feel or your intel, obviously without oversharing, or, perhaps there's not an opportunity to overshare, but if it was metaphorically heaven or hell, and you have to be right with this. If you're wrong with it, it's you and the bad guy. If you're right with it, it's you and paradise. Would you say Drake May is the preference of the highest decision makers here? Do you feel that?
I'm not going to go as far as saying that right now.
Understood.
I'm just not. It's possible, but I also think there is a lot to like with Jaden Daniels' tape, which is potentially the reason he might go number 2. And I say this speaking about what they think. I'm not like I like Jaden Daniels' tape, but I also think they would really like Jaden Daniels' tape. JJ McCarthy is pretty pro ready. Like, I'll tell you something interesting. I went back last night. Before Josh McCown got hired last year by the Carolina Panthers to be their quarterbacks coach, he was working with a company called Underdog Fantasy, doing some video series where he just assessed players' tape. You can find this stuff on YouTube.
Why would Underdog want somebody to analyze tape?
To evaluate quarterback prospects with an experienced mind. So Josh McCown, there's like a 40-minute him breaking down Bryce Young. There's a 40-minute him breaking down C.J. Stroud. And I've watched these a lot because it gives me a pretty good indication of what Josh McCown looks for. Yeah. But I rewatched C.J. Stroud for 2 reasons. One, to remind myself of what Josh McCown looks for, but also to remember what C.J. Stroud looked like against Georgia in the college football playoff. And what he looked like is a pro-ready quarterback without a shadow of a doubt, and Josh McCown made that very clear. There are very few guys in this class that look even remotely close to that. J.J. McCarthy is probably one who is more of the polished than probably even a Drake May, to be honest.
I'd like to get to the bottom of something that transpired yesterday 9 to noon, and I'd like to get to the root of it because you and Nordo, Matt producer, the Con, erstwhile Juice Box, you guys got together and did a noon to 2 show on Saturday, and it's fine work. I mean, both of you are high enders on the radio.
No, really appreciate that.
Or you wouldn't for one work at KFAN, and for the other to aid KFAN. And the reason I ask and what I want to get to the bottom of is I don't know what happened to the producer over the weekend, because he came back Monday. And now all of a sudden, keeping 11 and 23 and going best player available was the modus operandi. And for the first time in X amount of months, I mean, I've heard from him and others glowing things said about Jaden Daniels. But yesterday it was, he's my favorite quarterback. Is it in the entire draft, including Caleb Williams?
Yeah, my favorite of the group, because he's got, by far, I think, the largest total upside.
Of the group, which includes Caleb Williams?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So there it is. I mean, I'm like, well, where did all this come? I mean, what happened? Well, so then I started tracing the tracks. And it all
followed the trail.
It led back to noon to 2. And
no, it did.
I don't know what happened. I would just like it explained to me if at all possible.
Well, the sticking at 11 and 23, we're talking about it before yesterday's show. It's like 10 days in front of the draft, put 10 takes out there. my goal ultimately is that this team has identified somebody, as Alec and I talked about on Saturday, the guy versus a guy, which we discussed a bit yesterday as well, PA, and kind of the, how big is the gap between maybe the three guys that are going to be potentially available in that 2-3-4 spot, and how this front office views those gaps. And does it mean we get up to 4 and we just get one of those guys because we think KOC can flourish with any of them?
Yeah.
Or is it, as Adam Schefter tweeted, that Drake May's their preferred guy? Maybe it's Jaden Daniels. But just in terms of being YouTube highlight reel guy and getting closer to the draft, all we've talked about is J.J. McCarthy. It just makes sense here, and the steamrolling with him never ends.
Yeah.
Drake May is kind of the blue blood of the group, as he was talked about in this position a year ago, and he still is. And then there's Jaden Daniels, who comes out of nowhere. And it's, well, he's got Malik Neighbors, he's got these badass wide receivers, and he's throwing to them. They're always 15 yards open. But the more you watch in terms of highlights and the more you read, it's like, okay, I don't know who this guy is off the field. I don't know anything about him as a human.
Right.
But in terms of a guy with the elite high-end athletic ability, combined with the fact that he might not be as polished or as pro-ready. Like, I think that's maybe an topic in conversations that put JJ above a guy like Jaden. But I think if you just stripped away all of expectations and moments in that, and you stripped away the difference or idiosyncrasies in a system, and you just said, I'm lining up these 4 guys, who is the guy that potentially, athletically, skills-wise, ability, can rise above all of them? I'm getting down that road where I think Jaden has the highest upside of any of them.
And my request to you, young Alec, is for you to channel your inner Dane Brugler or Mike Sando or Dan Pompey.
The beast.
and analyze what he just said.
Yeah, so here's what I'd say. Jaden Daniels, there is a very concerning statistic that comes with his evaluation. It's called pressure to sack rate. I don't know.
That's not why he left Arizona State?
There are other data points I think that would be concerning. But I just from a tape perspective, I'm just going to say that, a tape and analytics perspective, pressure to sack rate, is, how many times when you get pressure do you turn that into a sack, has proven to be a little bit of a predictor of quarterback success in the NFL. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Jaden has the highest pressure to sack rate of all these quarterbacks, which is concerning. There's no question about it.
Would of the most mentioned 6, would Penix have the best?
He would have the best.
Yeah.
Now you could argue, is that because he just gets rid of the ball? So is that because he's willing to throw it away? He's afraid to take hits.
Okay.
Like you can skew this conversation however you want it. But Jaden Daniels, everybody thinks about him in terms of highlights, runner, blazing across the field, and he definitely has that. There's no question about it. But he also has the pocket rhythm, the pocket mechanics that you really like. I think he doesn't have the arm strength of a Drake May or maybe even a JJ McCarthy, but he is very he's very accomplished in the pocket. He's very sharp in the pocket. And when you think about Kevin O'Connell and sticking on the rhythm and the timing of the play, that's really where I start with this, is which of these guys are very capable in the pocket to execute the play the way that Kevin O'Connell would want it called. And that's why I do think about names like Jaden Daniels. I think about a name like J.J. McCarthy because he is pretty sharp. He is pretty polished. Drake May is probably more of a, we're going to sit this guy for a longer period of time because his footwork needs work, but potentially the benefit of a guy like Drake May with the size and with the ability could be transcendent among all 3 of those. So it makes it really tough. The reason I bring up pressure to sack with Jaden Daniels is because I want to make it very clear. For as much as I or this team might like a certain individual, there is still a very high likelihood and probability that it's not the right, that it goes wrong, that the guy's not perfect. You just barely can find surefire prospects at that position in the draft. It just barely ever happens, which is why C.J. Stroud is such an anomaly.
If the Minnesota Vikings a week from Thursday were willing to give up picks 11, 23, and next year's first round draft pick, what percentage do you feel they will be able to get to 3, 4, or let's say 5? Is it higher than 50%?
For 4 or 5, it might be. 3 is probably it's going to be a little tougher than that. Is what is my opinion. Now there's an alternative that say the Patriots think that they like JJ McCarthy. And they could trade back and then trade back up to 5 or 4. Then maybe it makes them a little more likely to move off of it to recoup more picks. But I think it's possible. I think it's maybe potentially even like more possible than not.
All right, 3-2. So you would so it's more favored.
4 and 5.
It's the favored scenario.
Yes, I think when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah sat in this room with you, I think a month and a half ago or whatever.
Or last week.
Whenever. But he said we have a preferred scenario.
Oh, a month ago.
In my opinion, the preferred scenario is to trade up and get the guy who sets you up long term. But they've also said many times that another team has to be complicit in that action. And it's really hard to say. The other thing that Nordo and I talked about this weekend that you really have to watch is there are teams like the Giants potentially. There are teams like the Broncos. There are teams like the Las Vegas Raiders that might act a little more irrationally, and you're trying to be mindful of where they're willing to go, and that may drive the price up in the end.
See, the Giants, I'm glad you said that because I thought of this last night and I forgot to write it down. The Giants going from 6 to 4 for a quarterback still puts Arizona in a position to get the receiver they covet.
Correct.
Where 11 might house you LSU 2, WR 2 from LSU. It's
Malik
not
Neighbors, yeah.
It's not going to get you the other guy or Marvin Harrison Jr. So those are things that it's where. At this stage...
Wouldn't get you next year's 1 either. There's a lot to balance there.
That's true, but it would get you closer to... that's
for
a very,
the now time.
And
good point.
Here's the element of that I'd like people to think about pretty heavily. Joe Schoen, who's the GM of the Giants, he's been there a pretty good while, and they won the playoff game obviously here. But when you're in these positions as GM and head coach, and you've been in your job longer...
how long? David Gettleman was their GM within the last 10 years.
I think it's 2-3 years, maybe. But you have, if your job security is in more question, then there's more likelihood that you act irrationally for the pressure of the present.
It's the Brandon Bean bit that you brought up a month ago and have written about and talked about, where it's like we think it makes sense, but if it doesn't, I ain't going to be here anyway.
Correct. And I think about it too with like a Sean Payton. Does he care about the long-term overall 5-year window health of the Broncos organization, or does he want to win right now because he's done this for a long time? So that part of how the Vikings try to assess what these other teams might or might not be willing to do is central to me in the crux of what ultimately happens.
I think for the first time, and I can't remember the last time, I went on a radio station somewhere else around the country and actually argued with the host. But it kind of happened yesterday with Altitude in Denver. And I know when Scott Hastings is one of the co-hosts. Now Scott, I've known Scott for a while through the NBA, and he's like the analyst for the Denver Nuggets radio network. So we're talking about Phoenix and the Wolves and a little NBA. But I did that purposely out of the gate when they welcome me in. Thanks for having me, Scott. Oh, goody. Up here in the cornfields, we hook KD and Bradley Beal. And so I'm trying to kill a little time there because I know what these guys had up their sleeve.
Yeah, you know what's coming.
Yeah, they wanted to regurgitate the J.J. McCarthy stuff, which they did. But where we argued a little bit, where we bickered a little bit, was when we were talking about desperation. And he said the Vikings are more desperate than the Broncos. And I'm like, well, we're in the same fishbowl, and the rocks are right next to each other. We're under different rocks, but they're right next to each other. Pick 11, pick 12. How in the hell can you say the Vikings are more desperate than the Denver Broncos? I'd like him to explain it. He didn't really explain it. And I'm like, all right, if we can go roster for roster here, man. You can hit me with Surtain, and I'll come over the top of Jefferson. And then this and this and this. So, I'll ask you, which team, if it's vying for a quarterback, which team do you believe is the more desperate team? Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, that's easy for me.
I don't think
it's a very good question, actually.
I mean, I ain't talking 70% to 30 here. I mean, it may be two noses hitting the wire together.
I kind of think the Vikings are more desperate.
Why?
Because you have a GM and a head coach entering their third seasons, whereas in Denver, you have a guy who probably thinks he can make it work with anybody in the whole world because that's the ego, and he's also had success.
Yeah.
So what? And I mean, ultimately, what does he have to lose? And I think you have I mean, I could be wrong. I'd be interested to hear what Nordo says, but I also think you have a fan base that's really desperate. And I think
theirs is too.
Yeah, that's no question.
Yeah.
It's an I kind of flip flopped as I was listening to you.
I see what
talk
you're saying.
about that.
I think it's actually the ego that you talked about, not only with Peyton but with John Elway. I think that makes that entire situation much more desperate than the Minnesota Vikings. They absolutely whiffed on the Russell Wilson thing.
Yeah.
And this will sound ridiculous, and as a Vikings fan,
Well, how about
trust
Hackett?
me, nobody.
I'm not trying to make Kevin O'Connell sound like Bill Belichick, but those coaches that they ran through there and sat down with, and then what they ended up with, and he didn't even make the season.
No, it's utter embarrassment.
Right.
And the long list of L's, and then in combination, you don't have a second round pick because you had to flip that for your current head coach, who the clock is ticking on that. As a Vikings fan, nobody wants to win a Super Bowl more as a Rube than me. There's no doubt about that. However, I actually would say that them winning it with Peyton and the gun for hire approach that they've kind of taken with that organization over the last better part of a decade now, I think that makes them so much more desperate as an organization. George Payton, I wonder if he gets 5 hours of sleep at night. I mean, that situation is so bad with the moves they've made in the last 3 or 4 years where, you know, this team definitely needs a QB, and a lot of people asking questions about how you could let Kirk go without an answer, and Kwesi trying to balance his own decisions with some of the stuff that was left on his plate from Spielman's era. The Broncos are more desperate, I just think, and I don't think it's close.
No, that's probably fair, and this is why I don't. I mean, that's a great radio question, but this is why I write. I think sometimes, so I can just sit with it and think about it.
All right, 3-2.
No, I just want to talk about. I'm more interested in like who's going to be more irrational, and that's where the Bronco, which maybe means they're more desperate because they have to act more out of desperation. I don't know. Yeah. It's a very interesting talker, I'd say.
Well, that's where with the capital advantage, though, going back, and I'm sure we've talked about it, Alec, is the idea that, you know, when the dust settles and the Vikings helmet does not pop up at pick 3 or pick 4, no trade was consummated, and it's the Broncos. And they get J.J. McCarthy, and we're at U.S. Bank Stadium. We're all freaking sour.
Well, that'll ruin my night.
But then when we find out, you want to talk about desperation, we have the capital advantage from not only the additional first-round pick this year, but if we're talking about future equity. But if they go Sylvester Stallone backwards hat over the top at a truck stop with a future first-round pick, and that's what they're going to have to do. So that's where that desperation angle comes in, where if they truly believe that this class is as deep as it is, and they actually hop, skip, and jump us in the draft, that's where that desperation comes in, because they will have to pay more than the Vikings from an equity standpoint to get up there. And so that's, I think, when we'll find out just how desperate Mr. Payton and company are.
Yeah, I mean, and the reaction to that, to me, would be very interesting. Like to see the Vikings fan reaction to that would be very interesting. Would the fan base be frustrated that the Vikings weren't willing to do more? I mean, that to me is where
well, they'll never get the truth, because they can get the truth from a scribe, and I'm going to believe you. I'm going to believe Ben. I'm going to believe Kevin or whomever.
Sure.
But it's still not from the source. You know, about, well, we actually offered exactly this.
You'd read that in a book 40 years later, but you're not going to get it. I mean,
but I think
you might get it.
One could assume, though, if the Broncos give up 12, this year's 3, next year's 1, and then maybe an extra day 2 pick.
Yeah.
Well, that would be more than even if Kwesi had offered his 2 firsts and next year's 1.
I think intuitively
so
you would
could
just
assume, like, whoa, we kind of got kicked in the pants here. We had no idea that Peyton was going to go that high, and they did. So they can have J.J. McCarthy then.
I think I ended the interview by saying, have fun with Bo Nix. And they didn't laugh, and I think they hung up on me. Alec Lewis with The Athletic and TheAthletic.com is at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center with yours truly, Paul Allen, and producer. Much more about which to chat when we return.
We want to hear from you. Send us your draft-related talkbacks all day long. And if you're selected as our draft talkback of the day, you'll win a pair of passes to the Miller Lite Vikings draft party. Full list of details, head over to KFAN.com, keyword contest. Draft coverage on the Fans presented locally by Pep's Draft House Pizza.
And off what Brett Blakemore just shared, the talkbacks for the draft tickets are going to take place about 30 minutes from now. So we have our beloved YA for a couple more segments. Then after that, we pause, and we will play back some talkbacks. And the victorious talkback via the free iHeartRadio app and the baby microphone, and the 30 seconds to opine, that will take place beginning in the neighborhood of 10:17. Best of luck to you, and file reports or formulate opinions off really anything that we've talked about today, 9 to noon, or specifically these football intensive segments with Alec Lewis from The Athletic and theathletic.com.
It's time for Vikes Bites!
It's Vikes Bites.
Presented by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef.
What the hell's your problem?
You said it so seriously. I just wish I don't know.
It's radio, nobody can see.
I know, but it was so funny.
We don't want a camera on us at all times.
No, you definitely don't need it, but
Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef, by the way, you can go to thousandhillslifetimegrazed.com, learn about regenerative agriculture. You can shop for elite beef or get it at your local co-op or Coburns. It's Thousand Hills. I want to start here. TJ Hawkinson, within the last day or so, talking about his ACL rehabilitation, Alec. And he noted, he knows Kirby, and I assume that's just from being back in Detroit, but he doesn't believe there's any malice behind Kirby Joseph's hit that put him in his current spot. However, he also wants the league to do something about it. And it's something that we've always kind of assumed, and I've heard others say it, and it sounds weird as a non-athlete, as a guy that's not out there. He would rather have a concussion than have to rehab his knee for 9 months. And here's what he said. It's tough. It really is, Hawkinson says. We're big guys running through the middle of the field. This is a business. I don't think anyone goes out on the field wanting to injure a player like that. So I'm looking at the light of that and hoping that's not what the intent was, to injure a player in that sense. But I think to have it happen a couple of weeks later with Higbee, I think that's something the league needs to look and see what it can do. So a lot of players down on the hip drop tackle that was recently banned during the owners' meetings. John Harbaugh among the loudest about that, of course, because Mark Andrews was placed out of the mix because of that tackle. But from this standpoint, it also got loud when Higbee went down. I just don't know what the league can do as they continue to narrow the spectrum upon which a defensive player can hit an offensive player.
Yeah, and we asked TJ yesterday, do you have any? And he's like, it's just kind of above it's for the league to figure out. It's a really complex question. If you can't hit a defenseless receiver up top and you can't hit him down low, it's a very tiny area which you can target the player. But I totally understand his perspective, and I thought he handled that really, really well yesterday. You could tell when we first asked him about it that he was a little hesitant, how much do I really want to say? And he's like, and he ultimately, I think, felt as if it would benefit everybody by him just talking openly and honestly about it. And he said that his injury was obviously brutal and terrible, and he's still working kind of mentally, I think, to recover from it all. But he also said that 2 weeks later, seeing Tyler Higbee, a guy he knows, suffer the same injury the same way by the same player, really got to him. It's a great question in terms of what you can do to defensively weed out those types of hits. And it's just hard for me to think you can continue to shorten the area that you can target and defense still mattering in the game. It's just a really complex question. I say it all the time. It's guys get hurt a lot in this sport that is humans flying full speed, crashing into each other. You're trying to prevent something within a sport that's just almost. It's just gonna it's there.
It's unpreventable.
It is in some cases now. Any vibe on when we can expect to see TJ on the field?
Still
having that first month of the season conversation.
Yeah, that's what I'd
Every
say.
time he comes up, it's always, well, eventually TJ is going to be healthy. Feels like that's not opening day.
He would like to, he said anything's possible. We talked about week 1. He said yesterday anything's possible. But the reality is, given how much they paid this guy and how important he is to what they want to do offensively, they're going to take it very methodically. And he raved, honestly, about the Vikings health staff and the plan and all that. And I thought that was interesting because around the league, there have been a lot of trainers and health staffers have been dinged through a lot of these surveys in recent years. But Tyler Williams, who Kevin O'Connell brought over here, has received a lot of rave reviews. And TJ said that they've worked really hand in hand with this. So I'd expect them to take it pretty methodically. If it was like week 3, week 4, wouldn't surprise me at all. If somehow he pushes the envelope and is there for week 1, I don't think I would also say it's the craziest thing in the world.
And that's why the team needs to draft Brock Bowers. Mike's.
Wait till you get a load of the early stages of the Kevin O'Connell interview coming up about an hour from now. Believe it or not, Brock Bowers makes the conversation.
Oh, hell yeah.
Really?
Hey, you'll see.
Let's put 4 on the field. JJ, Addison, TJ, and Brock Bowers.
Let's go.
Speaking of JJ, Justin Jefferson not at voluntary workouts, wasn't at voluntary workouts a year ago. Big deal, no big deal?
Can you play the sound effect?
Oh, the murmur?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites that you guys do. What was the question? It's not a big deal. Matters absolutely none to me that Justin Jefferson is not here.
Or won't be here?
I will
Would that matter to you?
What are you saying? For the rest of voluntary workouts?
Yeah.
Not a ton. I will say, if they end up drafting a quarterback, it really would be nice for him to be here and build a relationship. But I'm also not naive to think that the contract matters to him and his representatives. I would say the contract really matters to his representatives. But even if Justin's not here, I'd expect him to be. And they draft a quarterback, I expect him to be in contact. I expect him to be communicating. You can make a big deal out of Justin every time he walks, moves, is seen anywhere. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. This team really wants him here. The staff really wants him here. And as long as they pay him what he deserves, I'd expect him to be here.
Bites! Brought to you by Thousand Hills. I saw this. Now, you weren't covering the team when this gentleman played for the Vikings, but you had E.J. Henderson, and then you had Aaron Henderson. And Aaron Henderson, a day or two ago, via the Xbox/Twitter machine. Folks don't want to hear this, but as long as the Vikes locker room is filled with nice guys, they ain't going to win. Attitude reflects leadership, and the Vikings are a nice, family-oriented organization, top to bottom. So kind of the idea, and this has popped around in my head at times, kind of the idea where a team or an organization in some ways can adopt the mental and the philosophical vibe of a fan base. So the Vikings, they're hard Vikings fans. We are ardent. We love our team. We want them to win every game. But are we going to show up at people's doorsteps and get on the picket line and stop watching if they go 7-10? The answer is no. So do you believe that just the Vikings fan base, nice people, the Vikings organization, terrific organization, and he's right, from top down, awesome people in the building. Is that why the Vikings aren't winning more games?
So when I covered the Kansas City Royals for 3 years, the GM was the guy Dayton Moore, who had won a World Series, been there forever. And he, I've never said this publicly and but he used to say sometimes off the mic, we've got way too many son-in-laws in here. He's like, we got way too many son-in-laws in this clubhouse. I always thought that was an interesting comment. I'm reading a book right now called Captain Class that's really about how a lot of these teams take up the makeup of their captain, who typically the best teams, that captain's a little Draymond Greenish, where they're willing to go off their rails, where they're willing to say some stuff, and how a lot of the most successful teams in history have that type of guy who's brash, who's not the most beloved by the media or anybody. So it's
just like Andy Reid.
No, it's an interesting thought process concept. Look, I don't know. You win with good players. That's what I would say. So the more good players you have, your organization can give out candies at the door. I don't really care if you've got Patrick Mahomes. You're probably going to win.
Vikes Bites provided by
Thousand Hills, lifetime grazed, grass-fed beef.
This is 9 to noon.